Sometime in the dead silence of a Nevada night, Isabella Cruz pushed open the side door of the abandoned Desert Pearl, breathing in the stale air of a place that had forgotten it ever mattered. Her flashlight sliced across broken slot machines, collapsed beams and shadows that seemed to whisper warnings. She had come here out of desperation, a single mother with $473 left, an eviction deadline closing in, and nothing but stubborn hope pushing her through the darkness. But as she crept deeper, her eyes caught something wrong in the pattern of decay. A wall smoother than the rest, its surface too uniform, too intentional. A hollow echo answered when she tapped it. That echo hooked into her chest, pulling her toward something hidden. Hours later, with trembling fingers and aching hands, she pried the paint-buried seam apart, forcing open a sealed door no one had touched for decades. Cold air rushed out like the breath of a sealed grave. Steps descended into a darkness untouched by time. Heart pounding, she aimed her flashlight downward, realizing she wasn't just walking into a basement. She was stepping into a secret meant to stay buried. And for the first time in months, fear and hope surged through her at the same intensity, urging her lower into the unknown that waited beneath the casino's rotting bones. Beneath the casino, Isabella found a world frozen in time, a narrow corridor lined with metal doors, each hiding a relic that shouldn't have survived decades of abandonment. The first room opened into crates of heavy, intricately designed casino chips worth far more than the crumbling building above her. The second revealed shelves lined with perfectly preserved bottles of vintage liquor, labels untouched by light or air. But it was the third room that tightened her breath. A desk sat under layers of dust, a leather-bound ledger resting at its center as if waiting for her hands alone. When she opened it, the neat columns of numbers didn't read like casino accounts. They read like coded transactions, initials repeated across dates tied to enormous sums of money. Patterns formed where they shouldn't, deposits labeled private sessions, references to a mysterious northern account. This wasn't normal bookkeeping. This was a map of something clandestine. Isabella photographed every page, her hands shaking as she recognized the gravity of what she'd uncovered. Then her light slid across the corridor and found the wheel-locked vault door thick, ancient, and sealed with deliberate silence. Whatever was behind that door was the heart of the mystery. But she couldn't open it alone. She needed help. She needed expertise. She needed someone to believe her. And even in her fear, she knew one thing with certainty. She hadn't found a relic of a casino. She had stumbled into buried history, and it wasn't finished speaking. The vault cracked open days later, after retired electrician Frank Delgado and master locksmith Walter Chen studied its stubborn steel like archaeologists brushing dust off an artifact. When the final internal latch clicked, Isabella pulled the wheel with both hands, opening a room that felt impossibly untouched by time. Inside were stacks of pristine 1940s $100 bills wrapped in government-issued bands, boxes of uncashed war bonds tied with cotton string, and shelves of photographs capturing young soldiers laughing over card games in rooms Isabella now knew intimately. Higher on the shelves were folders filled with coded intelligence documents, personnel lists hidden behind initials, maps marked with combat zones, and notes referencing wartime operations disguised as private games. The Desert Pearl hadn't just been entertainment. It had been a covert intelligence hub woven into the machinery of World War II. Isabella sat on the floor, dizzy with the weight of discovery. She had come here looking for shelter, not a secret that could rewrite pieces of American history. The currency alone could save her life. The documents could shake institutions. But buried beneath the excitement was a dark whisper, secrets this old rarely resurface quietly. She rose slowly, knowing the vault had given her more than treasure. It had given her responsibility. And she felt for the first time that she was holding a story the world wasn't meant to forget. The news exploded before she was ready. Her attorney, the precise and relentless Diana Reeves, built a legal shield around every page, every bill, every artifact she found. At the press conference, Isabella stood beneath the cracked facade of the Desert Pearl with Sophia's hand wrapped tightly in hers, cameras flashing like distant lightning. She didn't dramatize it, she simply told the truth. A $450 listing, an abandoned casino, a sealed door, a vault that history had lost. Reporters leaned in, captivated by a single mother unearthing a buried network of wartime intelligence. Historians called it the most significant discovery in Nevada since the 1950s. But with the spotlight came two silent men in dark suits, their politeness colder than the vault she'd opened. They claimed some documents remained classified, demanded immediate access, and pressed for government possession. Diana pushed back with iron logic and louder patience. After hours of tense negotiation, the agreement was delicate but fair. The government would temporarily remove documents for classification review, return everything not legally restricted, and formally acknowledge Isabella's rights. Still, as the agents left the casino, Isabella felt a truth settle heavily inside her. Once you disturb old secrets, those who guarded them rarely walk away quietly. But she didn't back down. She had opened the vault, and she would protect the story it tried to bury. Momentum surged like a second life into the Desert Pearl. Volunteers, mechanics, retirees, military families, students, old gamblers who remembered the casino's neon glow arrived daily to help rebuild. Local businesses sent supplies. Restaurants donated meals for workers. A crowdfunding campaign soared past $200,000 in weeks. The decayed building transformed under hundreds of hands. The gaming floor was scrubbed clean and restored with vintage slot machines repaired by collectors who saw history, not junk. The back rooms became museum spaces filled with framed photographs, preserved ration items, replica intelligence files, and carefully lit displays of the original chips and bottles. Frank rewired room after room, his aging hands steady, his eyes bright with purpose he thought he'd lost years earlier. Sophia danced across the stage they rebuilt together, her laughter ringing through the hall like a promise. And Isabella, once exhausted, broke, and terrified, found herself guiding crews, organizing exhibits, and shaping the vision of something far bigger than survival. The Desert Pearl wasn't just being restored, it was being reborn. And as walls brightened and lights flickered back to life, Isabella realized she wasn't simply building a museum. She was building a sanctuary for truth, community, and every forgotten soul who had walked these floors before time erased their footsteps. By the next year, the Desert Pearl opened its doors as both a museum and a beating heart of its community. Visitors poured in from across the country, curious to walk the same rooms soldiers once used during wartime leave, eager to see the vault that newspapers called America's accidental time capsule. Vintage slot machines allowed guests to play using replica chips, with profits donated to local charities. The stage hosted swing bands, veteran celebrations, school performances, and community gatherings. The museum wing displayed replicas of classified documents, timelines of intelligence operations, and the preserved ledger that had sparked everything. Scholars visited weekly. Tour buses lined the desert highway. Families recognized their relatives in archived photographs and wept in the exhibit halls. Meanwhile, Isabella's life shifted from survival to stability. Debts paid, a modest home secured, a college fund established for Sophia. Yet she never indulged in extravagance. Every gain fed the trust, ensuring the desert pearl would thrive long after her. And every night when she locked the museum's doors, she stood for a moment beneath the restored neon sign glowing against the desert sky. She had turned a forgotten ruin into a living monument, not through luck, but through the courage to walk into darkness and keep walking until she found the light buried under it. Years advanced, and the desert pearl grew into a landmark that reshaped its region. Abandoned buildings near the highway were purchased, restored, and revived into vintage cafes, antique shops, and retro motels, inspired by Isabella's model. Historians used her discovery to unlock broader wartime intelligence networks across the country. Documentaries, university lectures, and novels reference the casino as a turning point in historical transparency. When the final classified files were declassified 15 years later, the full truth emerged. Vincent Ashford, the casino's founder, had been a military intelligence officer operating under civilian cover. The Desert Pearl had served as a covert meeting site where officers returning from the Pacific Theater were quietly debriefed. When Ashford died unexpectedly, the government had sealed the building with haste, overlooking the vault entirely. Isabella updated the museum, ensuring the complete story finally saw daylight. As Sophia studied history and museum curation, Isabella began preparing the Pearl's future, establishing a board, training staff, and laying the groundwork for the next generation. And through every interview, every lecture, every visitor's awe, Isabella understood something profound. The vault's greatest treasure had never been the money or documents. It had been the truth, the kind preserved not by chance, but by courage. On a quiet evening years later, after the last visitor left and the lights dimmed to a warm golden hush, Isabella wandered through the restored casino one final time before locking up. She paused inside the vault exhibit, running her fingertips across the replica shelving lit softly to honor the secrets once buried there. The memories rose around her, the dust in her lungs, the cold air of the hidden stairwell, the weight of the ledger in her shaking hands. She remembered being that frightened mother with nothing left but determination, stepping into darkness because every other door in her life had closed. Now she stood inside a legacy, not of wealth, but of revelation. A legacy built from a decision everyone else would have called reckless. And as she stepped back into the echoing hall, she felt the Desert Pearl alive with every life it had touched, every truth it had preserved. She whispered a quiet promise that it would continue long after her. Then, with a full heart, she turned to the listeners of her story, to you, and spoke with the warmth of someone who survived the impossible. If this journey moved you, make sure to like this story, leave a comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales brought back from the forgotten corners of the world. And before you go, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now as you hear this story?